All right, we're live on December the 3rd, 2025. Let me check my notes. We were live last night on Substack. So if you're not subscribed to the timosmond.substack, that's a place where I am doing random live streams in order to generate YouTube shorts, because it automatically parses the video and extracts 1 to 3 minute segments, provides titles, the captions, and it auto exports to YouTube. So it's a great resource, great tool, and I'll be doing more of it. And I think it's going to be useful as we go forward, because we go into topics, hours and hours and hours, and people who aren't familiar with our perspective, with the basic premise of this channel, might not get it. Well, they won't get it, but they might grasp the shorter segments. But I think by now we've made it very clear as far as what the purpose of this is. And I'm really enjoying the pushback and criticisms, because it really exposes the layout of the media ecosystem and who's going to defend their programming. Because the mainstreamers automatically assume their programming because they're granted the moral and intellectual high ground. They believe they're paragons of objectivity and they are the truth, because they're adhering to the mainstream unchallenged propaganda. But the alt media people are just as dogmatic, just as deceived. But since they're not going with the mainstream, many of them, well, all of them, falsely presume that now they're the standard bearers of truth. And that's one of the big deceptions. It's like basically they fell for an old trick. The triangulation inherent in mass media is designed to include the alternative. So they're not outside the system, they're not inconvenient, they're not people who escape the programming, who are somehow challenging the system in any way. They're actually part of it. And issue by issue, I've gone through what I consider to be Trutherville orthodoxies, and every time I do, I rattle a cage. Don't dare criticize the superstition of chemtrails. Don't dare criticize Dr. Fauci phobia, because the instant you do, the people who are locked into those issues will react in a very visceral, emotional way, frothing at the mouth, and just spittle all over the keyboards, just typing their responses like, how dare you? How dare you be anti my anti-position? And in their minds, to be anti any of their positions is to be pro the other side. So if you're not against chemtrails, well, now you want chemicals sprayed in the faces of everybody. Now you're basically advocating for chemical warfare. It reminds me of Seinfeld with Kramer and the AIDS ribbon. He's on an AIDS march, and he doesn't want to wear the little ribbon. And someone's like, why aren't you wearing the ribbon? I don't want to wear the ribbon. And, he didn't like the peer pressure. And they're like, aren't you against AIDS? It's like, yeah, I'm against AIDS. I just don't want to wear your ribbon. So these people gather around, hey, this guy doesn't want to wear the ribbon. And they beat him up. Well, that's your average truther. It's all virtue signaling, and they're very combative and self-righteous. Nauseatingly so. Self-righteous and impervious to facts, just rigidly dogmatic. So the mind control is pervasive in this system. And if you're carrying any red pills, you're a fool. I mean, there's no polite way to put it, because you've been served alternative controlled opposition talking points because you didn't fall for the mainstream and you were satisfied with that. It's not really a critical position. And you only have two options. And when I say fool, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, everybody's a fool in this world. The world stage is designed. It's a system based on lies, and it turns everyone into fools, dupes, and liars by default. And so I'm here advocating for honesty and truth. And as Confucius wrote, the beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. And obfuscating the language only helps the other side. There are people like, oh, just give them a chance. They might. No, you don't debate with unreasonable people who are impervious to logic, who don't respect it. You don't debate with the intellectually dishonest. You label them. This person's intellectually dishonest. Facts don't matter. Facts bounce off. They're inoculated against facts. So what we're doing is we've already established this, but we're expanding it, bringing in more people into the off-world stage perspective. So I've been developing a 7-point lecture that really goes into 7 specific points about the world stage, fabricated events, the reasoning behind them, why we even have these. And from this perspective, you can see that there's a closed informational system that people are stuck inside of. So this is about decompartmentalizing the world stage, the media ecosystems, and recognizing where you stand in it. And are you still adhering to a perspective that they gave you? Are you still leashed to their paradigm? Are you within their parameters, or have you stepped out of it? So I use the magic show analogy because most people are sitting in their seats watching a magic show. And when we call it fake, they get mad because they can't tell how it's fake. Well, you can't see the fakery if you don't get out of your seat. But they look at us as wrong, disruptive, and our points of view are invalid because we're not sitting in our seats. So that's what I mean by the off-world stage perspective. It's looking at things from a different point of view that includes additional information that the obedient captive audiences will not get. And that's fundamentally it. The alt media are actually obedient. They're still obeying the essential program. And this is very important to highlight and point out, because a lot of these people have been saying to me, well, you guys are so focused on nuance. Aren't you worried about the technocracy and neural implants and Bill Gates and Elon Musk and the end of the world? I'm like, no, I'm not living in this movie anymore. I stepped outside of this movie paradigm. Like, I'm not in the theater of Psywar. I'm actually critiquing it from the outside. And so they say, you're getting distracted. I'm like, what do you mean distracted? We're the only ones doing anything worthwhile. And I would ask them, what have you done? What have you done other than pointed out the obvious fact that these things are being faked? What have you done with that information? Like, how are you still hung up on Charlie Kirk? It's been months. Because they're addicted to the rush, the high of their daily dose of red pill, the daily current thing. So they're like cats being led around by a laser pen. They just chase the dot. Well, there's no coherence to what truthers or alternative media brings to the table. It's just an alternative set of opinions disconnected from any framework, disconnected from any attempt to make sense of it all. The best they can do is blame some nebulous group and try to expose it like this is a mystery to solve. We just unmask the bad guy and everything's going to be fine. No, the bad guys are all characters in this thing. But the last few months have been extremely revealing and useful. And this latest spate of PSYOPs have all been really great case studies. So we're not just studying the PSYOP and calling it fake. We're actually studying the media consumers, including the truthers, who are media consumers. I'm not a media consumer. And if you're in the IPS think tank and you're not in the wrong place, you are not a media consumer. You're a media analyst. You're engaging in a philosophic breakdown. You're looking into information processing, psychoepistemology, how people process propaganda. And discerning between real and fake is a huge part of what we do. But the mainstream and alternative perspectives are, both of them are passive. They're passive recipients. Their minds are basically garbage cans, open garbage cans for Big Brother to dump its garbage into. You know, like you got your New World Order sewage pipe of propaganda just being dumped into people's minds without any kind of refutation, any kind of skepticism. They just take it all in. And it informs them. It enhances their worldview with a lot of things that don't actually exist. But it's all based on the audience being passive, sitting in their seats. So what the off-world stage perspective offers is an active mode of media observation and analysis. It's not consumption. Again, we're not consumers. What I'm doing is I'm analyzing how the programming hits these different demographics and what that says about perhaps where this thing is going. So when people act like they've already figured it out, like we already know the Charlie Kirk thing's fake, let's move on. Well, show me your work. Show me your homework and show me all the details that you have that led you to this conclusion. Because if you can't prove it's fake to a normie, a skeptic, then you don't have anything. You just have an opinion. So we have to also maintain a higher standard of evidence. Low information disbelief is just as bad as low information belief. These are both passive modes of consumption. But things have been moving along and progressing nicely. So what I've developed is a talk that focuses on about 7 or 8 different points that could explain this concept in its entirety with the aid of a few infographics. And I've been working on this for a couple of months, mostly in my notes, a few dry runs. But once I get it right, it's going to be the basis for my book promotion, for the handbook for the recently deprogrammed. Because we're not debating alt media. We're not trying to confront them necessarily. We're just looking at things as they are, as objective as we can be. And I like the fact that we do have critics and people pushing back because it exposes the architecture of the world stage, which is an invisible cage, but it's compartmentalized. So people reveal quite a lot with their opinions. It tells you everything. One stance that you take will give away a dozen other stances that you also agree with that you might not even know. And that's the nature of mind viruses. If you haven't read Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody, the guy who, I think he wrote the original Microsoft Word, he explains this concept quite well in terms of memes. You know, memes aren't just funny images of cats, but memes are units of cultural information. And it can be graphic, it can be audio, it can be anything. But essentially, we're looking at meme warfare. And what Richard Brody writes about is how you can passively take in ideas without, if you're not critically analyzing it, and these things aggregate. And you can be, over time, fed a steady diet of memes and ideas, which, when they coagulate, become essentially a system. A mind virus is really just a set of beliefs that you catch in a passive way, and then you pass it on. So you'll notice the evangelical nature of truthers, where they want to share the truth and wake people up. When somebody says, I want to go wake people up, what they're really saying is, I want to spread my mind virus. I want to replicate this. I am merely a carrier, a symptomatic carrier of some extreme mind viruses. So I used to really push back against the mind virus concept because I'm not affected by these things. And I reject the idea that I'm taking in beliefs passively. But in the last 6 months, I've had to concede that mind viruses do in fact exist. However, they're divided into there's a few categories. They do exist. They are a thing. And I have said that the inoculation is infinite plane radio, awareness of these things. So if you're a passive news consumer, then yeah, you are susceptible to mind viruses. You can catch a belief system. You are susceptible to being radicalized. And I know this is true, and you should too, if you just look at 2020. How many people that you knew that were neutral about news or media became activists, became anti-Fauci, anti-needle. And I'm not honing in specifically on anti-vaxxers, but they're one of the most recent examples of a lot of people who caught a mind virus and sought and still seek to spread it. And I'm not criticizing these, but I had a caller the other night who he called in, and I knew what he was going to do, because they always do it. These mind virus carriers, they can't help it. They can't help bringing out their prominent mind viruses and trying to, get you to contract it. And so we had this caller on a live stream the other night, and he's like, yeah, we got to do something about the genocide and the masks. I'm like, that's like 5-year-old stale propaganda. I do not exist in the same universe as someone who thinks that we just experienced a genocide. I mean, did you all notice a genocide? I didn't. But some people believe that we have experienced one, and it's just being covered up by the media. Well, the only reason somebody would have arrived at that is a mind virus, because there's no evidence to support the claim. So the mainstream and alternative media are both passive positions that are very susceptible to these types of things. Radicalization. Media can radicalize people. If they can get you to react emotionally, then you are susceptible. And when was the last time a news story caused you to react emotionally, where you defended it, where you lost your critical thinking and just said, this one looks real, I'm going to respond emotionally? Think Matt Hyde, who's like, we are all Charlie Kirk, and your sister is that girl in the subway that got stabbed. Like, no, I'm not Charlie Kirk, and that chick's not my sister, and I don't even remember her name, because they're like, say her name. No, I'm not going to spread that mind virus. I deliberately did not memorize her name. I blocked it. And I'm not Charlie Kirk. But they want you to identify with these things and personalize it and not think too critically. But you can see how it's expected, that you're supposed to react like everybody else. You're supposed to care. It's like that's a false moral high ground, that, you show some care, you cry for something. No, it means that you're basically a dupe and you're emotionally manipulated. But we've made this distinction between the off-world stage perspective and the controlled op well enough. Like, again, I'm not interested in debating these people. I'm interested in separating from them. And the reason that this is going to work is that a lot of these beliefs are really held in place by the ego, which cannot admit that it's wrong, that it's not perfect. So the ego is the main guardrail, that even if they see past the bloody guardrail, a lot of them are still going to stick behind something, whether it's peer pressure, fear of nonconformity, whatever it is. Most people aren't going to leave. And so the more that we define our position, the louder they get opposing it, the more they expose that they're actually on the other side of the fence. And that's what we want, because the division is already there. I'm not creating division here. It's already there. I'm just noticing it. There's a marketplace of ideas, which we've divided into this, essential, mainstream, and then the subsets. That's the entire ecosystem of ideas. And what we're bringing in here is a completely different perspective, where a lot of the people who would be part of this are still stuck mistakenly thinking that they belong in alt media. So this requires something of a marketplace disruption. We have to introduce these new ideas to reach those who've already seen through the deception. So again, alt media people are dupes. And you can't be afraid of calling liars liars, even if they're just lying to themselves, or calling the superstitious superstitious, irrational, impervious to logic, dishonest. I got some emails because I've offered $100 for a photograph of a chemtrail, and people have been sending me pictures and metadata. And I'm not disappointed. I'm not surprised. I'm just like, I'm embarrassed for them. Because I'm looking it up and it's like, okay, that's an airplane at 30,000 feet. This one is American Airlines. And given the climactic conditions, persistent contrails would have been would have been predicted that day. Like, they're so married to the conspiracy theory, they're so attached to it, that they can't even analyze the facts that contradict it. So what do you call that? You call that dogma. It's a dogmatic, like religious beliefs. Religious beliefs don't require facts. It requires emotion and dogma. And you'll notice that religious pushers will use sophistry, they'll manipulate language. They try to manipulate you into not pointing out that everything they're saying is basically bull, that they don't have any facts for anything. It's all emotions and feelings. And that's fine. If you want to have emotions and feelings and, be a religious person, do it. But don't pretend like it's objective and that you can hold these beliefs as equally valid as those that can be tested and verified and modeled. So religiosity is a problem. To me, religiosity is inherently dishonest. But that's not my business. If people want to lie to themselves so they can sleep at night, whatever. Do drugs, lie to yourself, immerse yourself in entertainment. Sure, we have to self-soothe, I guess. But I'm not going to be here pretending like I respect those beliefs as equal. I think it's all darkness. Like, I'm done with the darkness and ignorance and pretending like these lie-based perspectives are equally valid propositions. They're not. I have people, like this one guy comments on my channel. He's like, I just randomly came on here and I just randomly took some pictures of some trails today. I'm like, no, you're a shill. And you were directed to my channel to spread false information. And they'll all say the same things. It's like they all copy and paste from the same document the feds give them. Yeah, I was sitting outside and I saw these unmarked government drones spraying chemicals and the whole sky turned gray. No, you didn't. These lies get tiresome. But again, my point here is that we're well enough established that we no longer need to push back against them. Like I said, I've been doing this just to make a point. I'm just showing people, hey, look, this is the alt programming. They're just as bad as mainstream. They're foolish. They're foolish, they're angry, they're mad, and they have religiosity. And so religiosity is bad enough with religion, but it's even worse when people have a religious way of looking at news media. And when I say religious, I mean they've got a priesthood, they passively accept the information, and the beliefs that they take on don't have any evidence necessarily. But it's largely a matter of they belong to a collective and they just recite these things as articles of faith. So now that we've already established the off-world stage perspective, now it's time to explain it in as concise a way as possible so those who are already deprogrammed, those who are no longer susceptible to mind viruses, can gravitate over here. So now I'm actually engaged in outreach to the deprogrammed, those who are on the path. If you're on the path out of the world stage and you're not running circles around fake issues, if you're not following Candace Owens, if you're not stuck in any of these cul-de-sacs or fake conspiracies, you're going to find your way here. And I've said before, we only need about 10,000 people. We need enough people to create a self-aware demographic. And at that point, the next phase, and this is where we need to reach out to content creators. If you're a content creator and you're not carrying water for the mainstream or alternative, then this is the place, because you will have a built-in audience for it. Captured the Loop says, sick of the truthers expecting and waiting for Jesus to show up. No one's coming to save you. And save them from what? The deep state? All the save the children people, all the adrenochrome alarmists, they never talk about it anymore. It's like, did you save the children? I didn't see them. No, they just moved on. So these are what I used to refer to as current thingers. They're just responding to the next current thing. And this is why you have a lot of them saying, you guys are distracted. You're still focused on these past events. It's because they're focused on the next thing, the next headline. And that's not the way that you process news actively. You don't passively accept headlines as valid. You suspend judgment until you get enough facts. So this rapid, I guess, transition from being exposed to it to just repeating it, to me, that sounds like what I call a mind virus. They want to be the first ones to catch the latest mind virus and then spread it to their friends. And every mind virus contains a faulty premise. I mean, if you look at how people respond to every event, it's formulaic, it's predictable. That's why I say fools. And I want to make sure that they know where I'm coming from, because I'm not espousing opinions. Like, I don't care if you believe in unicorns, in the stratosphere, making trails in the sky. I don't care. You know, the fact of it is, the reason why it's critical to understand these false beliefs is that there's a reason why people fall for them. There's a vulnerability in their thinking process. If you can't see through a loaded question, if you can't reverse engineer faulty causality, if you can't correct yourself with a false conclusion, then you're very much, I would say, primed to believe anything. But it's a very sophisticated system, and most people don't see through it. And you'll notice that there's no controlled opposition for media skepticism. What's up, American Father? Says IPS wins again. Venom says the new show Pluribus is about an alien mind virus that turns everyone into a hive mind. Yeah, that's filmed over here. I'm thinking about driving to one of the locations where the movie started. You know, I was actually thinking about doing the Breaking Bad tour, but you have to have at least 3 people with you. And you get in the RV and you go to all the locations that are, key places where the movie takes place. You know, like Mr. Car Wash, for example, or Walter White's various homes. I might even just take myself on a tour in my truck and maybe do some artwork of each of these places. Snake Injustice says, if they control everything and even send disinfo agents to mess with you, what chance of building momentum against them? Yeah, that's a good question, because we do have this. They do send agents. Oh, Venomous says they spread the virus with chemtrails. Yeah, that's kind of funny. They use chemtrails to spread the alien mind virus. It's so hilarious. I've only seen the first episode. But now here's the thing. We want the controlled opposition to push back, because we're exposing the compartmentalization, and you can't see it except when there's friction. And all these critics are exposing the invisible cage for what it is. So when somebody says to me, you guys are distracted by this event, all they're telling me is that they don't see the relevance of examining these events on a timeline. They're just stuck in a 24-hour news cycle. You have to break out of the news cycle. They want you in the 24-hour cycle and then ready for the next hit, ready for the next hit. And the only way you can reverse engineer the world stage model is by maintaining a continuity, recognizing that all these events are interconnected, that we have a timeline that we live on, we live through. You know, we're all sharing the same now, we have the same past, we're going into the future together, but we have the objective reality, and then we have the imposed world view. And the imposed world view differs in key fundamental ways, not just in what they add, because this is essentially hyper-reality at this point, as Baudrillard would describe it, where we are immersed in fakery and there's no way to make distinctions between real and fake from the world stage perspective. From the mainstream perspective, they can no longer discern real from fake when it comes to events. They can no longer tell. But we want them to push back, because what we're doing here is we're not reaching them. We're not trying to reach them. We're only trying to reach those who've already seen through it. Snake Guy says, algo is controlled right. No one gets here unless allowed. Well, here's the way up. I have a multi-pronged plan to do this outreach that's not relying on the algorithms. And this is why I need to engage more with the AI agents, because I have plenty of strategy here, but right now I'm sort of, well, I don't have my computers and I left a laptop behind. I'm sort of like going very minimalistic digital nomad right now. But one of the plans is really quite simple. I have an AI agent ready to launch. Just need to tweak it a little bit. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through Twitter and it's going to respond to every single person. And we're talking about 10,000 plus, anybody at all from September 10th until now who have noticed the Charlie Kirk thing was fake. Not the people who think he was killed by Netanyahu, not the Candace Owen cult. I'm talking about the people who are saying this whole thing is fake. The people who retweeted, who commented, who liked any post insinuating the event was fake. All those people are reachable, like right now. I mean, I could one by one reach out to them and say, hey, why don't you listen to my 25-minute presentation on this? Actually, it's going to be more like an hour and a half, but why don't you listen to my breakdown here, which puts the media fakery of Charlie Kirk in context. And the big reveal, and this is the part that's going to keep truthers out of it because they will not understand this because they're locked into their daily news cycle, is that the major fake events, which do become historical events, they are being processed as history. These events are planned decades in advance. Decades. So that's a major paradigm shift that they're not going to accept. But I plan to reach all of these individuals, those who have seen through this stuff and don't have the proper See, this is the issue, is there's no platform for the perspective that takes into account media fakery. There's no Alex Jones of auto hoaxing. So it's not about the algo. To me, it's really about target marketing. And I know how to target market. So what we're doing is we're going to use AI agents to specifically target anybody who's seen through it enough to basically say to them, hey, you're not going to get any traction showing this to Stu Peters, showing this to Candace Owens. You're not going to get any traction stating that these things are fake to people who believe them as real. Like we need to separate from that pool of alternative thinkers because they're not really alternative. They're alternative programming. They have alt programming, which is passive, as I said. So no, they're 100% reachable. And if you weren't here in 2019, I remember at one point someone said, you know, you can't reach anybody. You only have 300 subs. And next thing you know, some rapper dies. I comment on it. Within 6 weeks, we have 12,000 subs. 1,500 people during live streams. The numbers are there, and they're not shrinking. If you paid attention to the response to the Charlie Kirk thing, you would know this. You would know how the numbers are, and you would also see that there's an entire demographic of thinkers who have no representation. Like, hey, Candace, maybe Charlie's still alive. You think she's going to validate that? No, she's very well aware. She's part of the gatekeeping operation. It's quality over quantity, but we already have the numbers. Snake says, how do you know those were real, not agents? How do you know I'm real? Like, what do you mean, how do I know they were real? If you haven't noticed, there is no platform for this. There are no bots, agents, podcasters, or content creators or media agencies that call mainstream and alternative narratives fake. Nobody does that. They don't address it. This is outside of their established parameters. They're not allowed to. So the very fact that you have people who are espousing these views indicates, to me, that there's a great number of people seeing through it. But they're not validated, they're not vindicated, they're not even censored. They're just marginalized and not even noticed. They're unacknowledged. How do I know they're real? They're real if they're noticing reality. That's a pretty good indicator. I'm telling you, there's no effort to promote what we're doing. There's no effort to create an army of shills to offer a rational breakdown of a fake event. There aren't any. The system defends itself against people like us. The very term auto-hoaxer was invented to shut us up. And if you haven't worked with AI agents, I recommend you get into it now. It is the future. So no, I'm very well aware of the numbers and the stats. I have no reason to believe that these bots that are making sense are fake, or these people that are making these valid observations are fake or are bots. No, and that's the thing. It's a numbers game. It's target marketing. There's at least 50,000 people, if you look at the aggregate of people who've noticed, who've commented, who've retweeted, who've hearted comments. Those numbers suggest that there's a lot of people who could benefit from the off-world stage having a platform. Like, your opinions are being wasted in alt media. You're not doing anything. And those who are saying we're being distracted, it's like, no, we're not the ones like cats chasing a laser pen. You know, we're not the ones with the attention span of a goldfish. If you can't see how fake events from 20 years ago are relevant to fake events today, then you don't have the off-world stage perspective, because the world stage isn't static. It's the collectively agreed upon version of events resting upon previous fake events, resting upon recent history. And recent history is nothing but recent news. And our news is infused with fakery. It's bent and it's distorted in measurable ways that we can demonstrate. We can falsify their stories. But what we have offered here, what we are offering to those who are seeing past the media duopoly, is an explanation for it. Revealing the media architecture. And again, this is the thing that's going to divide people. If you're not willing to accept the fact that these fake events are planned 10, 15, 20, 30 years in advance, then you might as well stay in Trutherville. Go get your Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown. Go hit a Q-pipe, because this wouldn't be for you if your incredulity is going to block you. Because that's not skepticism. There's a distinction between being incredulous and being skeptical. And this is a fundamental distinction that really needs to be acknowledged, because there's a lot of people who call themselves skeptics. The skeptic knows the most about the issue he doesn't believe in. The skeptic will take a steel man argument for the other side and melt it down. Someone who's incredulous ignores the information, mocks the person, and burns a straw man and walks away just as ignorant as before. We know more about the crap that the brainwashies believe than they do, and yet we don't believe in it. What accounts for that? Informed disbelief. And if you weigh them on a scale, informed disbelief and low information belief, informed disbelief weighs more. What we say is far more valid than their defense of headlines that they've just absorbed. American Father says, only puny secrets need protection. Big discoveries are protected by public incredulity. Marshall McLuhan. Yeah, precisely. So incredulity means low information disbelief. Like, I find that hard to believe. I don't believe it. A skeptic says, I find that hard to believe. What are the facts that support your claim? And let me look at those. And so there are many so-called skeptics who've heard me describe the world stage, fake events, predictive programming, concurrent programming, reinforcement programming, fake historic events proactively inserted into our timeline, history bending. And they're like, that's too hard for me to believe. And they don't process it. If you haven't seen Westworld, and I brought this out, I describe these as Westworld syndrome. They have Westworld syndrome. So that's a term to describe people who live in a continuous 24-hour news cycle, who cannot process anything that wasn't spoon-fed to them, or anything from outside of their model. Like, oh no, I wasn't taught by Alex Jones that the fake events are scripted and prepared decades in advance. So that's not true. That doesn't look like anything to me. Well, what we're talking about is not going to be spoon-fed to you. There's no popular platform, media personality, or influencer who's going to tell you the truth. They're all liars. All of them. And, I know there are people who have good intentions and, they're just trying to warn you. They're just trying to keep you informed about these things that they're actually afraid of. It's like, well, their good intentions are being used against us. Their good intentions are, what's that expression? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's like, screw your good intentions and your emotions and your feelings about this. Feelings have no place in this. I'm not emotionally attached. I'm actually detached. Yeah, the Fed car. I don't think we're enough of a nuisance for us to be followed. Although I don't know. I do have a stalker who works in the White House. So we can't ignore that. Oh, by the way, Stripe. My Stripe account was compromised 2 months ago. They finally turned my account back over to me. If you didn't know, the hackers, long-term hacker, this White House press corps guy, stole an email address of mine. Blunt force hacking. I mean, I don't know how he did it. It's not the first time. I mean, it's been 7 years. He's been working on this, trying to shut me up. And he made multiple attempts to get into my Stripe bank account, but my two-factor authentication blocked it because he doesn't have my phone. But what happened is there were so many attempts that they shut my account down. Well, they blocked it. And so I hadn't been able to access it for a couple of months. And it sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing because these are examples of, these are felonies, every one of these. So we're moving closer, I think, to some type of action by the FBI, but I'm somewhat pessimistic about the FBI's capacity to do anything. This guy's connected to Garrett Ziegler, Donald Trump, White House Communications Agency, friend with Donald Trump Jr., friends with Alex Jones and Joe Rogan. This guy's way too politically connected that I almost think that he's protected and he has some kind of immunity. But we'll see. The FBI reports continue to pile up, but I got my account back. That's the important thing. But what I'm getting at is that we're not really large enough to be noticed. So we're not censored. There's no censorship going on here. And here's the other point. The reason why we didn't maintain purity and break down the explanations into the most concise breakdowns possible, we have to really make this simple to transmit, is because this can be scaled up. Auto-hoaxing the mass media, media fakery analysis would actually appeal to a lot of people who are tired of having their intellects insulted. We have to look at this as an intellectual revolt. Like, aren't you done being lied to? Doesn't it bother you that you're treated like your mind is just putty, that you have no critical thinking, that you're just someone to be emotionally manipulated? No, I mean, what they have done is they have put everybody into a state of perpetual info war. I mean, this is how they maintain the status quo. This is the peace that Orwell wrote about. War is peace. It actually is. Info war is peace. Mind war is peace. And people in mainstream and alternative media are fighting in the mind war. So you're not anti-war, by the way. You're an info warmonger. If you come in here telling me I'm wrong for not wanting to decapitate or execute the deep state, I'm not fighting the system. If you think I'm wrong for that, I would just say that you're an info warmonger. You're actually a mind war casualty, and you're tilting at windmills. You think these truthers are doing anything? No, they've been nullified. They're totally controlled opposition. Someone had a comment here. American Fathers, I learned that Nick Fuentes led the J6ers into the Capitol, but he says he didn't enter and was never arrested. Yeah, did you see the video? He's like, you guys got to run up into the Capitol. He's 100% an op. He's a Poe. He doesn't believe what he's saying. He's a polemicist, like Candace Owens. All these individuals that are influencers in the alternative media are a controlled opposition. You only have a couple of options here. Either they're fools and dupes and don't know what they're a part of, or they're consciously acting as agents and are taking part in the propaganda campaigns to manipulate you. So what is it? Are they manipulators, evil propagandists, or are they just very foolish, innocent, insulated, have no idea? Either way, you can't follow them. You're going to follow them because they have good intentions, yet they're still fools, and they're carrying water for the other side. You know, propaganda mules. And there are so many propaganda mules out there, and they think that it's like martyrs. There's like this martyrdom thing. Like I'm carrying the truth. I'm carrying this burden. I'm waking people up. No, you're spreading mind viruses. You should go into quarantine. People don't like being told they're wrong. You know who likes being told they're wrong? Me. If I'm wrong about something, please tell me. If I'm going the wrong way, tell me. If I'm doing it wrong, let me know. You know, I've noticed that a lot of people don't want to admit that they're wrong. That's why I call the final guardrail the ego. And I can call it out. You can tell when somebody's very invested into a lie or something they were wrong about, they're not going to back out of it. So faulty causality is a very sneaky logical fallacy. A becomes like, so A is before B, so A caused B. It's just an easy thing to fall into. So I saw lines in the sky and then it rained. So the lines in the sky caused the rain. A before B. A caused B. Well, no. The rain was already going to happen. The reason for the lines is that the conditions that would lead to rain are also conditions that would leave persistent condensation trails. So it's an easy trick to fall for. But there's a variant of it where you have some people who believe that if you spray vinegar into the sky, the trails will disappear. So you spray the vinegar, A, and then the next thing that happens, B, the skies clear up. Did A cause B? No. The skies were going to go clear anyway, whether or not you sprayed your vinegar. But the people who promote that idea are never going to come out and say, hey, you know how I've been spraying vinegar for years and advocating it? Yeah, I was wrong. I was taking credit for something that was actually happening naturally. No, that's a huge blow to the ego and credibility. Although, to me, they're more credible if they could admit when they're wrong. But they won't. So I can just tell you outright. And I hate naming names, but, you know, if you're going to be a content creator, you're kind of out there. Crow 7777777, that guy, yeah, he believes that boiling vinegar clears the skies. He is never going to walk that back. He is never going to reverse engineer his thought process or the fallacious approach to arriving at this erroneous conclusion. He will never course correct. He will never admit he's wrong. And that's because the human ego is, it's not that it's fragile, it's actually very rigid, intransigent, and it resists any attempts to take it down. So that's just my prognosis is that Crow 777 will be a vinegar sprayer for the rest of his life. He will never back away from that. And that's, again, it's a human frailty. But like, if I'm wrong about something, let me know. You know, people consistently tell me and they challenge me on things, and I look into it. We were wrong about the mainstream, and we found our way into alternative. And then looking around, we're like, wait a minute. We're wrong about this as well. And there's no alternative to the alternative. So most people just lazily stay in the alternative. And it's like, okay, you're kind of a subset of a subset. And you're ignored, marginalized, not taken seriously, and you're attempting to be heard by people who are deliberately excluding your point of view. So if you want to be heard, if you want your point of view to not only be noticed and validated, but also to have interaction with people who've arrived at the same accurate and correct conclusions, you have to go off-world stage. And off-world stage is where you're at when you recognize that there is a world stage. And that's what my lecture is about. And I'm going to polish this up a little more. Maybe by tomorrow I can release it in a video form. But what I'm trying to convey here is that what we bring forth that no one else has, because they're inside of it, is that there is a model. And the model is a representation of the world that has been modified. It's diverged from the real thing. It's not accurate. But it's deliberately a construct that serves the worldview monopoly. It maintains this bifurcated information war, and it maintains this status quo. So what we're doing is we are aggregating people onto the off-world stage. And this is the thing too. If you recognize the model and you understand the reasoning behind this, there's no way you're going back. There's no reason to go back. And a lot of people already agree with us. They just don't know it yet. Like there are some who are like, there's no way they could plan events 10 years in advance. There's no way they're using entertainment media to carry propaganda messaging to reinforce future fake events. Yeah, we can actually prove it. And you've already accepted the premise. You just don't know it yet. If you recognize PSYOPs, you've already accepted the premise of proactively creating our history. You just have to dig a little deeper. Like, what does this imply? If fake, then what? So if you're aware that the Donald Trump thing was fake, that opens up the conversation to who was behind it, how long in advance, how much interaction is there between the media agencies, the Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, the ambulances, the fire departments, and all these people. There's a whole group of interlocking organizations that would have to work in tandem in order to pull something like that off. And then the other important point is that the simulated events are never challenged. They're not challenged. They're actually cemented into our history. They're inserted into the world stage. The left wing does not invalidate the fake events that support the right-wing agendas. The right wing does not expose the fake events that support the left. DJ says, in 2026, we'll have been on this script for 444 years. The demise of the U.S. was scripted before it became a country. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the Manly P. Hall, Masonic historian, wrote about this, that the American eagle is a phoenix. And I think there's quite a lot in this bigger script where America is the Tower of Babel. It's built to fall. It's the Titanic. It's going to sink. And that it's scripted, there's nothing we can do about it, and the story of the fall of the West has been conveyed to us in many different ways, contemporary myths. And how far back does this go? You know, Morpheus was like, this is the 5th iteration of the Matrix. It's 500 years. And there are people who are looking at history skeptically to the point where they're like, we can't trust anything past 200 years back. Like, no, I totally get that. But a very pertinent question here is, when does news become history? Yesterday? Last week? You know, you want to talk about fake history. Well, how can you separate it from fake news? And how is fake history created? Well, it's created in the same way that lies create an alternative version of events that you internalize. So if you recognize that media is a liar, a very good and skilled liar, and it helps if you've been lied to. If you've been lied to by somebody on a routine basis over a period of months or years, or someone misrepresents themselves, or they consistently lie on small things, but they build a perception that you internalize without firsthand experience, but rather by taking it secondhand. That's what we're talking about. The media is constantly lying. And then another aspect of it is, if you challenge those lies because your perceptions contradict it, your perceptions are ignored. Not just by the media, but because you're talking to a screen, so it's a one-way transmission. It's Kafka-esque. But also your friends and your family. Your friends and your family are only going to reinforce the media's gaslighting, which is to say, don't trust your own senses and perceptions, trust what the media is reporting. And you've probably experienced this, where if you talk to anybody in Normieville or Trutherville or Woketown, you can talk to anybody, wherever they are on this thing, about any event. And they might agree with you if you're making valid points, but the next day, it's like the Men in Black will have visited them. Like, I can't tell you how many times when I was, I wouldn't say I was a 9/11 truther, but I kind of was. And I thought it was real, but George Bush did it with the skull and bones. I mean, I had all these conspiracy theories, like a lot of people, because they're fed to you. And I could sit down with anybody and convince them that 9/11 was an inside job. It's not hard to do. But the next day, you talk to them and they're back at square one. It's like it doesn't stick. There's no continuity. There's no, and the reason why is that this information doesn't fit in their paradigm. It doesn't make sense. Like, oh, media lies? And even if they accept that media lies, this is the part that gets them, is they don't understand that media isn't just news outlets, but it's actually every single propaganda conduit. Like, I still encounter people who have a hard time accepting that mainstream entertainment is a conduit for propaganda. There are people who have a hard time with that. It's like, how naive can you be? The existence of predictive programming is not a conspiracy theory. It's evidence of mainstream entertainment serving the interests of government propaganda operations. Every single psyop that we've examined, every major psychological operation that creates a fake event that becomes part of our shared history, every one of them is attended by predictive concurrent programming. That is, we are prepared for it in advance by influence operations, like advertising. What is propaganda for? It's to change your minds. It's to direct you to a predetermined set of options. It's to get you to formulate opinions about characters you haven't even experienced yet. So we have the foreshadowing, we have the framing of events in advance, but then when the events happen, it's like they crank it up. The intensity turns up, and now all of the entertainment and podcasts, everything forms an echo chamber reinforcing the event. Then afterwards, they talk about it until you get bored of it. And by that time, it's already etched in stone. Remerick says, the printing press is a turning point in news media and the rise of literacy in order to read their version of the story. Yes, the printing press represented a disruption of a power monopoly, and the power monopoly is rooted in a disparity between those in the know and those in ignorance, the hoodwinked. And what they have done to counter that, because you would think the internet would have been the new movable type press. Like, we're in this information reformation right now. Yeah, sure, for a little while, but they're already closing it up. And with the advent of generative AI and hyper-realistic deepfake videos, we've reached another de facto state of illiteracy. So maybe we can read the words, but now we can be lied to visually and we cannot tell real from fake. So I would argue that we're actually now a society of illiterates. And I saw this coming. I said this was going to happen. I said we're being pushed into a new dark age where the visual illiteracy is going to serve the same role as enforced illiteracy in previous times and circumstances. Like slaves aren't allowed to read. Well, why is that? Well, they don't want them to think themselves out of the predicament. Ignorance is weaponized. And if you can't tell real from fake, then you're fundamentally ignorant. You're confused. So what we're offering also, what this off-world stage perspective offers, is the ability to discern real from fake without having to rely on the visuals. It's like, if it doesn't look fake, are you going to just believe it's real? Because things aren't going to look fake in the future. So how are you going to know? You're not going to know unless you understand what media is. And what I'm going to be explaining in this talk that I'm working on, one of them is the concept of hoax indicators. But my point is, we're at a stage now, we've differentiated ourselves from the existing marketplace of ideas. We're already a separate entity. So the next step, the next phase, is to actively recruit those who have seen through the program enough to grasp this, and they can confront it on their own. And to me, it's a very easy choice to make. You can be lumped in with the ignorant, propagandized mind virus carriers, and you can participate in the info war against your own interests. Or you can step off the world stage, engage in an intellectual revolt against systemic fakery and mockery and enforced ignorance. It's not a hard choice to make. And I think there's a lot of people who aren't really aware of this yet who would automatically jump in here and add to the conversation, because the next part of it is we have to build the parallel media. We have to go back in time, retro auto hoax every major event, and show how far back this formula has been employed, media fakery, and arrive at better estimates as to how far back each of these fake events has been planned. And by doing so, we can reveal that we're living in essentially a movie, enhanced reality, and we have no real power, but we have steam valves. We have the illusion of control. And that's not black pill. It's reality. And the illusion of control is what I think maintains the status quo. But again, this is a work in progress. But I think we're at the point now where we can scale this up safely. Because if we had done this at any other time, like 2 years ago, if we scaled up, we would be outnumbered. The objectivists, the media analysts who stepped outside of the box, we would be outnumbered by people who are still clinging to various guardrail issues. So if you're still clinging to any of these parameters, these barriers they put there, you're going to stand out. And most of those people aren't going to want to be here anyway. Like if you're really stuck on the idea that people really die in psyops, you're not going to want to hang out with us. If you're in any of the anti-positions, you're going to be outgrouped, because we don't need people who are fighting the info war. And if you're fighting the info war, go fight it. Go do it. Go be a puppet for Big Brother. Go be a useful stooge. Go be a fool. I'm all for respecting people's free will, and I'm not trying to save people. That's certainly not what I'm doing. I'm not evangelizing. I'm not saving people. I'm not spreading mind viruses. It makes more sense anyway, in terms of, the economy of effort and time and resources, to only focus on those who have self-extricated 90% of the way, who are on the trajectory to escape, who've bypassed all the cul-de-sacs. Those are the only ones we're reaching out to. Because if you try to reach out to somebody who's clinging on to some pet issue, you're going to be fighting them. And we don't want people getting into the off-world stage who still have one foot in the matrix. Because all they'll do is they'll contradict, undermine, and attempt to spread their mind viruses and poison what we do. I'm not naming names, but there was someone in my YouTube comments who was warning people about me. Like, this guy's not against Fauci, don't listen to him. This guy's not against chemtrails, don't listen to him. I'm like, who are you to get into my comments and try to gatekeep? Like, if you're not getting paid to gatekeep for the InfoWar, then you're a fool. If you're getting paid to do it, well, then you're an evil agent operative engaged in these psychological terrorism efforts. You're part of the problem. But I find people very questionable. I think it's very sketchy. I think it's very questionable for somebody to take a stance against what we're doing. Like, why would you be against us? And then there are some people who have, I'm sure, good intentions, and they're like, well, can you just entertain from a devil's advocate's perspective that maybe the media is not lying? And I have to remind them, we're the devil's advocates here. If you're defending the mainstream proposition, the mainstream point of view, then you are a media advocate. And if you're a media advocate and you're not getting paid, if you're not getting paid to be a crisis actor, why are you doing it? What's your incentive? Is it because you feel like you have the moral obligation? Because you don't have the moral high ground? So anybody who's coming against us, debating against us, needs to be looked at as very questionable, very shady. Like, what is your problem? Are you just ignorant? Or are you serving the dark side? And it is a dark side. We're talking about systemic fakery, mass manipulation, and the masses being put into a state of ignorance compared to the elite with their worldview monopoly. Like, you're on the same side as the people that you're against. If you're against Dr. Fauci, you're actually on his same side if you're anti-Fauci. You have to step out of their pro-anti dialectic altogether. If you're not anti-anti, you're one of them. Yeah, it's common sense to be anti-pro, but you also have to be anti-anti. The position we have on every single issue is none. None is valid. You know, I don't drink sugary carbonated drinks. Am I anti-Pepsi? No, I just don't drink it. I'm a non-Pepsi drinker. But the anti-Pepsi people would be like, well, if you're not anti-Pepsi, then you're all for flooding our diets with toxic amounts of sugar and contributing to obesity. It's like, no, I'm not part of that. They have everyone programmed to think there's only two options. And it's, you know, this is how they manufacture consent. I was listening to a short speech. I'm going to have to send this out on my email. You know what? Okay, the next newsletter I send this afternoon, I'm going to send a short video clip of Noam Chomsky talking about the need for a specialized class to rule over and make decisions for the masses who must be given the feeling that they're somehow contributing and part of the process, but they have to be left out. And the specialized class making decisions on behalf of the masses, yeah, that's essentially the worldview monopoly. That is what we're looking at here. A specialized class who've decided to take creative control over history itself. Because by controlling the news, they control the present, they control the future, they control the past. It's actually a very much a totalitarian system. And you can't see it unless you step outside of it. And you can't step outside of it if you don't stop defending it. You have to detach. You have to get out of the role of info warrior. You have to get out of the role of savior or a woke person. So wokeism is religiosity. Like, I'm not woke. I'm not woke left. I'm not woke right. These are both fake anyway. The dream world doesn't work on everybody. The blue pill dream, the blissful ignorance, the blissful going along with the program, yeah, it doesn't work on everybody. So they created these two compartments for those who don't fit into that. If you're politically leaning left, you're going to woke town. If you politically lean right, you go to Trutherville. And this is where you go because you feel like you're awake and everyone else is asleep. Like, oh, we're woke, they're asleep, we got to wake them up. But the truth of it is, the wokesters aren't awake. They just transitioned from a dream into a nightmare. And it is a nightmare. If you listen to these people speaking, they're like, yeah, they're scared of everything. Looks like since we've been sitting here, the mountains have disappeared. I think it's going to rain. I was out yesterday recording geese and ducks. You know what I do have as well? Having stepped out, having unplugged and detached, I have peace of mind. I mean, I've had peace of mind regarding the world for years. I wasn't even phased in 2020. I didn't fall for it for even 5 seconds. Like, I haven't been triggered by any news event in many years. IPS is mind war inoculation. But for the last few months, I've actually had a pretty solid streak of calm, tranquility, very much peace of mind in my normal life, where I can actually sit around drawing pictures of ducks. G says, Chomsky is essentially pushing classical Marxism concept of vanguard of the proletariat. Right. Yeah, the thing is, these ideologues might have some pithy quotes that are useful for spreading. They might have some right ideas, but none of them have the big picture. And if they're within the political horseshoe, then you can't really follow them on very much. But I take the wisdom where I can find it. You know, that's kind of what we have to do. A lot of the greatest research I come across comes from people who are fundamentally wrong about everything else. Like, their worldview is wrong, their political opinions are based on lies, they're manipulated, and their intellects are very much compromised by fakery. And yet, a well-reasoned argument based on logic and facts is what it is. It doesn't matter who's carrying it. But again, Confucius says the beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. So you need to be able to call out truthers as propaganda mules. Syop Sidecar says, should we send you photos of persistent condensation trail crisscross skies as baseline data? No, what I would say it's okay, because the science behind condensation trails is already well established. To be a chemtrail believer is to be anti-science. Call things by their right names. You're against the scientific method. You're against science. You're against identifying things by, I guess, a skeptical methodology. You're non-skeptical. You've compromised your intellect and you fall for some very easy to see through fallacies if you believe this stuff. They lost the intellectual high ground. When they ask the question, what are they spraying? That's a loaded question they don't see through. They're framing it incorrectly, but they're also saying so in ignorance. It's the appeal to ignorance that bothers me. The appeal to ignorance. It's like, why is the sky blue? I don't know. And then they give you some conspiracy theory to explain it. It's like, well, no, these things are well understood. Before you can formulate a conspiracy theory about something, you have to challenge the status quo. Like the status quo, like just because everybody believes it doesn't mean it's true. But if there is a status quo on any issue, it's incumbent on you, if you're going to challenge it or offer a new explanation, to show why your explanation is better than theirs. So you have a competing theory. Like, I don't believe in condensation trails. I just don't think that superheated jet exhaust, that hot air, would interact in the stratosphere in such a way to cause condensation and leave trails of ice. I just don't believe that. Okay, fine. Well, then what's your explanation? And if it's better, it's better. But you cannot just out of hand pretend like it's not there. That's the appeal to ignorance. Like, what are they spraying? Well, open a science book. Look at the history on the matter. Look at the Air Force's charts where they did their best to predict these things so they don't give away the locations of the airplanes. So if you're making a claim in ignorance of a better explanation, then your claim is worthless. It's worse than a superstition at this point. It's belligerently ignorant. Chemtrails is belligerently ignorant fear porn. And most of the people who stick to it are very much locked into their egos, which is really strange. Like, you have this identification with this issue and you can't let it go. And the facts bounce off you. Like a plexiglass screen is in front of you. You're just like, I'm not going to hear any facts. I cannot admit that I'm wrong. That's actually highly narcissistic. Where you have this mask of infallibility, and anything that detracts from it must therefore be ignored. You must defend the facade at all costs. No, please prove me wrong. If you could prove me wrong, you would save me a lot of time. If you could prove to me right now that the mainstream media is the ultimate truth, the arbiter of truth, they're objectively reporting facts, alternative media is wrong, and nothing's fake. Yeah, prove it. Because if you could, I could do something else with my time that would be just as fulfilling, but I wouldn't be wrong. Like, help me out here. If we're wrong about staged historic events and a proactively created history with events planned out decades in advance with a globally centralized media disguised as all these separate entities, if we're wrong about this, yeah, let us know. I'd appreciate it. Just send me an email. Nobody has, as of yet, offered any refutation of our claims about the meaning of concurrent programming. The only refutations that have been attempted have been, you guys just watch too much TV, or you think too much, or you're crazy. The best we get are ad hominem, straw man, and dismissals. And I'm saying let them be dismissive, let them remain uneducated. Because what we're doing is we're making incursions into this territory that has always been under control of this duopoly. And the longer they put off trying to refute what we're saying, the better, in my view. Because when we start aggregating big numbers, they will not have a clue. There will be no resistance to it. Not that I am opposed to resistance. I like the idea of a lot of tinfoil hatters high on red pills coming around telling us that we're wrong for calling things fake. Like, the conspiracy theorists today are calling us conspiracy theorists. It's like, we're the only ones that aren't conspiracy theorists. And, I've noticed, too, that the mainstream does not debunk conspiracy theories. They just mock them. They dismiss them. They do straw man attacks. But they never fundamentally undermine these. Why is that? It's because conspiracy theories are the other side of the coin. Candace Owens is not legitimately trying to solve a murder mystery. She's like, oh, the French government's going to kill me with their Israeli assassins. And then she goes out to Dollywood, some theme park in Tennessee, takes selfies with a bunch of fans. It's like, yeah, you're really worried that the governments are coming after you. Anyway, we'll be live this evening. I'm working on this breakdown of the world stage and all these concepts in such a way that I can present it to people in a bookstore setting. So if I'm in a bookstore with a pile of books by me, the Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar. If I'm in a bookstore, I want to be able to read a chapter, explain these concepts in such a way that they can be understood. Even if they don't accept it, they can understand the premise and entertain a hypothetical. See, a lot of people aren't, it's not that they're not capable, but a lot of people don't want to entertain hypotheticals. Like, what if you're wrong? Let's entertain that. They don't want to. And if you can't entertain hypotheticals, then you're not a deep thinker. Like, you should be able to ask, what if it's completely this way? I'm completely wrong and it's actually this way, and I never thought about it. Like, you should be able to entertain these things. And then there's also there's the shallowness. Like, people who will say, well, I think Trump faked his ear wound. Okay, and what would follow that premise? If he faked it, then what? Ask 10 follow-up questions. If you can't go 10 steps past that proposition, then your take is very shallow and it won't take you anywhere. It won't go anywhere. You'll still be stuck in the box. Because if it's fake, then who's involved? If it's fake, what does it say about previous events? What does it say about elections? There's so many cans of worms to be opened. I got a barrel of worms that I'm ready to dump onto the world stage and let them deal with it. Like, it's not our problem. We're not confused. We're not wrong. We're informed. They are misinformed. Those who are paying attention are misinformed. Those who aren't paying attention, who are just like not watching the news, if you're not paying attention, you're under misinformed. The only people who can claim to be informed are those who recognize the world stage. That is, they recognize that our manufactured worldview must also include the fake stuff, media fakery, and the worldview monopoly as it's exercised every single day. So no, we are correct. That's why I'm not really worried about this long term. Like, we are going to succeed in our mission, the infinite plan, because we are actually resting on facts. And I would openly invite a challenge, but there's a reason why they don't challenge this. The reason why they can't challenge this is because what we're talking about is above the pay grade of all these highly placed propagandists. It's clear that some people are in the know about some things in a compartmentalized way, but the whole big picture isn't very well articulated to anybody. There's no platform for it. So we have a lot of advantages here. So the best thing we can do is to avoid alienating to people who aren't apprised of the facts, and to avoid any kind of an echo chamber, we have to break down the complex into the simple explanations, or as simple as we can, so we can offer a chance for people to refute it, debate it, or comprehend it. But the facts are on our side. We're confronting a system of mass manipulation, a hyper reality, hyperstitions, God constructs. It's a very interesting time to be alive, and I look forward to future psyops, because every single fake event that they pull off just gives us another opportunity to expose how it's faked, to demonstrate our methodology here, and to show how predictable these things are. See, one thing about a model is it should offer some predictability. And it does. I'm like, well, if this event is fake, there's going to be A, B, C, D, and E. Drills, concurrent programming, political agendas, predictive programming. There's going to be engineered, bifurcated narratives setting the left against the right. I mean, there are so many hoax indicators, which is a big part of this. Because I want to make the point that we are not calling everything fake. There's nothing lazy about our approach. Our approach is not based on incredulity at all. I would say that we are the only legitimate media skeptics out there. You can call yourself a skeptic, but if you don't know more about what you're refuting than the people who believe it, you're not a skeptic. Skepticism requires work. It requires time. It requires the suspension of judgment, not reflexively dismissing things because you personally find it hard to believe. You have to take yourself out of it. So when I say the ego is the barrier, the ego is the guardrail, that's what I mean. You have to take yourself out of the equation. You have to be willing to be wrong, but also you have to have the independence and integrity to stand on being right. Whatever issue it is, if you're right, you have to be able to stand on it. Like, yeah, I'm correct about this. Too many people want to remain safe. They don't want to take a hard stance. It's like, don't be a coward. Don't capitulate to the lies. We know lies. We've already established this. DJ says Q isn't a person or a movement. It's a magnifying glass search icon. You know, I've seen that, but I think it's more of a pacifier. Like for babies. I think it's more of a pacifier. By the way, I was doing some research on the Bible, on the Gospels, and it turns out that before the Gospels were written down, you have all these fascinating connections between the various accounts. Well, the historians, scholars, describe this thing called the Q source. That was an interesting concept, the Q source. Some mysterious source or some vague source of all things that show an overlap in the accounts, but like, who is this mysterious Q? All right, we'll be back.